So a friend told me he thinks I'm more eloquent when I'm talking about books I don't like, rather than when I'm talking about books that I do like. Well, if that's the case, get ready for some extreme eloquence. Well, hello everyone. Despite that intro, I don't know how eloquent I'm going to be. I'm going to talk about Children of the Mind by Orson Scott Card today. This is the conclusion of the Ender Quartet, or the Quintet, which I don't think exists, but I digress. Unfortunately, this is one of the lowest rated books of the year for me, so I'll keep this kind of brief, but I do need to be honest. I do need to talk about the things that I think made this such a low rated book for me. Before I get into all of that, though, despite these last 2 months of Xenocide and Children of the Mind, I have enjoyed a lot of these Ender books. In December, middle of the month, I will be releasing a video with reading advice. So I put up with the bad books of this series for your benefit, so I can tell you what's good, what's bad. I can also tell you a good reading order for the Quartet, the Quintet, the Shadow series, all of those sorts of things. So despite my negativity last month with Xenocide, as well as what I'm about to say about Children of the Mind, realize there's a lot of greatness in this series, and I hope that you'll check out that video in December. So let's talk about Children of the Mind. If you saw my Xenocide review, you know that I liked a lot of it, but the end just took a plot turn, I thought, so ill-conceived, so ill-advised, and just took the story in a direction that, frankly, I don't know why anybody would want to follow the direction the story went. And it really tainted my overall view of that book. It was a book that was about a 3.5, maybe 4-star book until that big turn 90% of the way through the book, and it became immediately a 2-star book for me, because I hated the ending of that one. So I went into this one with really low expectations, hoping that by going in thinking, oh, this is going to be a dog of a book, that maybe I'd be surprised and would have a favorable view of it. Alas, it picks up right where we left off in Xenocide and follows pretty much only the storyline that I hated at the end of Xenocide. A storyline that I'm still shocked that some editor just didn't say, hey, Orson, what are you thinking here? Do you really want to go this direction? I think at this point he'd only published a few books, so it wasn't like he had this huge clout, you know, like a Stephen King right now where an editor is not going to overrule him. I think a strong editor could have taken this story in a different direction because I hated where the story went. And there's very little in this book that I enjoyed. And it's unfortunate because I thought this series started with a lot of promise. Of course, Ender's Game is one of the finest works of science fiction you'll read, but I enjoyed Speaker of the Dead. I gave it a 4 out of 5. There were a few things I didn't like about it, but overall, I liked that second installment of Ender's story. And then Xenocide took it a place I didn't want to go, and it continued all the way throughout this book. So where to start with the things? First of all, the overall conception of the book is flawed, in my opinion. So right away, that's something that I didn't like. The entire book is based on something that I didn't want to happen, I didn't think should have happened, and I'm being vague because I have to be spoiler-free here. I also feel in this book that I was being preached to or talked down to. I hate when authors don't trust their readers. And Card had a point here, and he made his point continually. But he didn't do it in a manner that I felt like I was respected as a reader. I felt that he just blunt forced everything he wanted to tell you about his conception of this idea at the end of this quartet, just forced it down your throat continually. And one of the big results of that is the expository nature of the dialogue was horrendous. It reminded me of, in a different way, so if you watch those 1-hour self-contained television dramas, to just use a different analogy here. The thing I hate about those 1 hour self-contained television dramas is not that it's self-contained episodic television. I enjoy that when it's done well. I hate because at some point in every one of those shows, your CSIs, your NCISs, your Chicago everythings, you get a paragraph of exposition that is broken up one sentence at a time to each character, where one person says one thing and the next person says the next sentence, and it just flows so perfectly because it's one thought. Hello, writers, people don't talk like that. That's not realistic dialogue. And it's even worse when it's in a book, because you don't need to do it in a book. And here it wasn't like it was one character with one sentence, but it would be a paragraph, and then the next character would pick up the same exact thought. And he would try to show that they were maybe arguing about it, but they were always driving home the same points. And it was just such an inelegant way of expressing what he wanted to express in this book. And it was insulting. It was a book that I just felt was way too self-aware as to what he was trying to do. And because of that, I felt that ultimately he failed in what he was trying to do. Now, there is one really brilliant chapter towards the end on a thematic level that Card was primo at his best, fantastic. But one good chapter in the scope of this almost 400-page book, it doesn't make up for just the way that he forced everything that he was talking to you about. Another thing that I didn't like about this book was characters. So this is the 4th book of the series, really the 3rd book. You could look at Speaker of the Dead, Xenocide, and Children of the Mind as kind of its own self-contained trilogy. And there were characters that I liked going into this book that I didn't like in this book. And there were characters that were okay, that I found downright insufferable in this book. In fact, at one point, one of the big overarching plots of the entire series, from all the way back to Speaker for the Dead, is there's this fleet coming to blow up the world of Lusitania. And because I found some of these characters so insufferable, I was just like, well, maybe it'll go there. I won't have to read these characters anymore. It's just a horrible portrayal of character, in my opinion. There were a few characters in Xenocide that I liked that barely appeared in this book. And I hate what he did with Ender at the end of Xenocide and where it went here. It kind of went nowhere, in my opinion. There were some good plot elements, but it was just so ham-fisted that I just didn't enjoy it. Except for the one chapter. That was the only thing I enjoyed about this book. This is a book that I think it's about 370 pages. For me, that's a book that normally takes 4 days to read. This took 8 days to read because I just didn't want to read this thing. And I would read a chapter and then I'd open up my phone, and I don't do that. This was such an uncompelling read. Is that a word? I don't care. It was such an uncompelling read that I just didn't want to read it. So, unfortunately, Children of the Mind was a huge disappointment in this series. Had one good chapter, but most of this book is one of those skippable books, and that's kind of how I might feel about all of the Ender Quartet. I'll let you know in that video in December my full thoughts in this series, but overall, I gave Children of the Mind a 1.5 out of 5. So I'm almost done with this Ender journey. Up next is The Last Shadow. I hope it returns to the form of the Shadow series, because I thought the Shadow series was far superior to the Ender Quartet, and I am anxious to see where this goes, because this picks up plot threads from both the Shadow series and the Ender Quartet and hopefully resolves them. That's one thing Card is pretty bad at. He does leave these plot threads just kind of dangling at the end of some of these books. I don't know if he forgets them or just knows that he's going to come back to it later, but I am looking forward to The Last Shadow. I will go in open-minded, maybe with a little bit of tempered expectations, but I don't know if it can get much worse than Children of the Mind. But hey, I don't know how eloquent this was. I don't know how good this review was. But anyway, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Also, find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.